Welcome to the Prepared School Psych Podcast, your resource for student success. I'm Jenny Ponzurek, your host and guide, drawing from over 2 decades of experience as a school psychologist, presenter, and consultant. Join me as we explore practical strategies and insights from educational experts. From evidence-based approaches to real-world challenges, we are here to support you. Whether you're a school psychologist seeking new tools, a teacher in search of effective strategies, or a special education director eager to support your team, this podcast is here to provide you with the resources you need. And as we journey together, I have a special offer just for you, our dedicated listeners. Get exclusive access to a free 2-week trial of the Prepared School Psych community. Experience on-demand resources, mini courses where you can earn CEUs, and access to me and my content specialist through a variety of methods to answer your questions. Head over to jennyponzurek.com/podcast now and use the code podcast at checkout. That's podcast, all caps, for your 2-week trial. Information about this free offer can also be found in the show notes. Come and be a part of our supportive community. We would love to have you. Now, tune in and get prepared. Welcome to the Prepared School Psych Podcast.
All right, welcome everyone to another episode, and I'm so excited because today I have Dr. Ashley Doss, who works as a critical response and wellness coordinator for the Anchorage School District in Anchorage, Alaska. She previously worked as a school psychologist in the district for 4 years, and prior to this worked in the private practice field, completing an internship for neuropsychological evaluations. Dr. Doss specializes in crisis response, threat assessments, and suicide assessments in the educational setting, supporting schools on best practices. For the last year, Dr. Doss has served as the president of the Alaska School Psychologists Association, or ASPA. And prior to this has been a committee chair and board member, supporting the association as the webmaster, CEU coordinator, and newsletter editor. I feel like you've done every single job there now. So I am so honored to have you here, Ashley. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, we like to start off with a question that most people ask one another, which is, what is your favorite TV show you are watching right now?
Well, right now I'm really into Will Trent. I really appreciate the just broadness of the characters, but also like the plot and the storylines and where they go. I'm absolutely fascinated with the character Will Trent.
I love that show. I'm so glad the new season just started. So love it, love it.
Yeah, I know. Every Wednesday I'm like, oh, time to watch it.
Well, in one sentence, I know you've had various roles. How do you think your colleagues would describe you in your different roles?
I think they would probably most describe me as very passionate and dedicated and very research oriented. You know, I'm going to come with the facts.
Awesome. Well, you definitely need that in the specialized field that you have joined, of course. Well, how long have you worked in this field, and at what point in your journey did you become involved in your state association?
Wow. Personally, I always count working in the field as like the second you start an internship because you're there. So it's been like 8 or 9 years almost, which I don't know why I find math so hard. And I actually got started when I was doing grad school. So in Texas, I joined the Texas Association and I served as the student like newsletter editor for a couple years. And then when I moved to Alaska, within my year of internship, I immediately just joined and started getting involved.
Well, I'm curious, why leadership for you? You obviously are very passionate about it, right? Started at the student and then immediately moving and joining. So what about that kind of attracts you?
Well, and I want to note, like when I started as a student, I was in my late 20s as a student. So I was a little older than like your typical grad student that goes from high school, college, grad school kind of thing. It was more life. back to school, then eventually grad school. So at that point, I think seeing and having worked in the corporate environment prior to that, like knowing and seeing how much leadership has an impact on the processes and the policies and the way that things are done. And of course, recognizing, as we do know, that like best practices is not going to come out perfect in the real world.
Okay.
And how do we get as closely aligned to that? And knowing too, if we want to see change, we have to be the change. And so with all of that, I was just like, well, the only way that I could complain or I could get involved. And I might complain. I'll still complain. I'll complain with you. But I'm also going to get involved. I'm going to do something about it and, like really try and help.
I love that. I love that. Well, as a state association president, what have been some of your key initiatives?
Our biggest key initiatives right now are really trying to restart our state association. So we've described it as going somewhat defunct in a sense.
Okay.
Our membership numbers just dropped really low and it was kind of a free for all in a sense. And so now we're just trying to get back to that semblance and order and identifying and understanding all our board members are almost all new to the positions. So it's really been trying to understand what our job responsibilities are and how we can support and what that looks like, but then also finding the time to do that because
Right.
we have full-time jobs on the side. So our biggest initiative is getting people aware. And then I know too, our other steps are really looking at the legislative side of things and those policies and procedures and trying to get school psychs more on the map in Alaska. And I think that with the alignment of a variety of new projects going on, I think that it kind of all just smooths out perfectly in that sense of like the timing of things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What has been an accomplishment in this role that you're most proud of?
I don't know. Like, I feel like this one's hard because I look at all of the accomplishments as not just something that I've done, but something that like my whole team has done.
Of course.
And so I really think like the fact that we have been able to build really strong communication with each other and share what we're doing and try and find ways to pursue each of our things that we're interested in. Because some of us are interested in like the legal aspects. Some people are more about the ethics. Some are like, well, what about, IDEA and policies? And so it just kind of depends on where it is and bringing it all together, I think, is that key piece. So
That's wonderful. Well, when you reflect back to when you were early in your career, what advice would you give to someone who's starting out in this field?
organization and time management are absolutely key. And I know I heard that a lot in grad school, and I can't impress upon it enough. But I also think that some of the biggest things, especially as time goes on, one of the things that I see is having really healthy boundaries
Okay.
and knowing what your boundaries are absolutely crucial to a successful life and career, because even if you have great time management and organization skills, if you don't have good boundaries and you can't say no to things that you can't take on, then you're going to hit burnout real quick.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the books that's been on my shelf for a while is a book all about boundaries. And it's been on my shelf. I think I've read chapter 1 twice. So it's actually going to be a book I'm going to be reading. I am someone who I'm really good at creating boundaries, but it's that enforcing those boundaries, right? But I'll have those good weekends where I'm like, this is what we're going to be doing for now on. And then the first time someone, sends me his message at 8:30 at night, I'm immediately, right? Because we want to help. And so it's that hard piece of, do I just stare at that and then think about it at 3 o'clock in the morning, or do I just take care of it right now? These are some hard things.
Yeah, prioritizing has been, especially in my new position as the critical response and wellness coordinator, because everything's a crisis when that's your job.
And it truly is. Yeah.
It really is. And so it becomes prioritizing the crises. And if we do look at things in that capacity, it's really about that prioritization. But I'm with you on that because I'm like, oh, and I like the preview in that sense, right? Like I'll check my email and say, what do I have to deal with come tomorrow? And if it's not an emergency, I just go, well, that's a 7:00 a.m. problem.
Well, I'm curious because we were talking before we hit record about this new position that you have, and you are on call, right? Because crises occur at any time of the day. So, how do you balance that need to have some boundaries with you have a different job responsibility that actually doesn't matter that it's midnight? This is when we're having this crisis.
Yeah. Well, and before I took the job, that was actually a huge point of conversation in our household as far as like, okay, if I take this job, like I not only have to get even better with my boundaries, I really need to enforce my boundaries.
Yeah.
Because like you said, we can create great boundaries. It's the enforcement piece that can oftentimes be a problem. So I've sort of created an accountability measure with my spouse so he'll hold me accountable for when I make statements, and I'm very deliberate about making certain statements like this is what I need to do, or I can't do this thing right now. And he's like, okay, Ashley, remember what you said, like that kind of thing. And then I think too, self-care is just so important. And we say that a lot, right? Because we're like, oh, self-care, but that's so all-encompassing. And we know there's at least 8 different areas, or yeah, 7 or 8 main areas of self-care. And it's making sure that your buckets stay well balanced because they're not always going to be completely full, but that
Right.
well balanced throughout and that you're putting things back into those buckets when they do drain out because that is so important when it comes to that recovery component for, situations like crises that happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, just a quick minute of your time to tell you about something coming up. Summer Boot Camp 2024 has been scheduled, and we are looking forward to seeing you virtually from July 8th through the 19th. If you are new to Summer Boot Camp, it is 2 weeks of professional development with some Q&A sessions to help answer all of your lingering questions. Whether you're starting your internship this fall, your first year in this field, or your 20th year, we have sessions for you. This summer, I am unveiling my IEP report card, a way for you to self-reflect and determine what is working and what areas are in need of some growth. We have resources all over the IEP report card, and to help you with those areas in need of growth, we have 12, yes, 12 professional development sessions over 2 weeks. Now, if you can't make the sessions live because you're actually going to enjoy your summer, no worries as we record everything. If you need some CEUs or a certificate of completion, we have those too. So head over to my website at jennyponzerk.com today, or click on the link in the show notes to learn all about the sessions we are offering. I will see you in July.
Exactly. And I know, I think the term self-care, especially post-COVID, it's almost become like a bad word in the educational world, right? Like, oh, don't forget, I'm going to give you 9 million things to do, but don't forget to get some self-care in there as well.
Right. But I'm
Um,
not going to tell you how to do it. I'm just going to say do it and hope you figured it out.
right. I love your visual of the different buckets because it is a constant refilling, right? And so I love that visual of how are we filling in these different pieces. And you use the word balance. I know a lot of times we use that word in our field. Another word that someone used for me once that really helped me was just more of a harmony.
Oh, I
Because
love that.
because
Yeah.
balance can feel like it's all supposed to be equally balanced, right?
Right.
And like we're in one of the most interesting times of the school year, which is, the spring as we're recording this. And so it's a really busy time. It's a really busy time for people who work in the crisis area as well, because everyone is stressed out. And
Yeah.
so,
I'd rate to the highest in the spring, like the rough time of the year.
yeah. Well, one of the other things, as we're here talking about leadership, a lot of people in this field, and I don't know about your graduate school experience, I don't feel like there was enough emphasis on the fact that most of us are going to be seen as a leader at our school sites. And a lot of people come to us as being people who have so much knowledge about the field of special education. And a lot of people aren't really ready for that, right? You seem to have some background in that corporate world, so you seem like you were kind of ready for some of those different pieces. What kind of advice would you give to someone who's feeling maybe that imposter syndrome, or I didn't know that this is what I was getting myself into, to kind of help them grow in their leadership just at their own school sites?
Yeah. And I do want to note that on some level, I feel like from high school, I've been preparing for leadership positions from the very beginning. So when I look at questions like that, I'm just like, well, from the beginning, people talk about how to best be a leader and put your best foot forward and stuff like that. But ultimately, I think that what we don't talk about is the anxiety and the fear that comes with that position. And how do we combat that to make the best decision? And really finding common ground as a leader is one of those big pieces. But when we also acknowledge whatever fears and anxieties that we may feel in that moment and just not let that overcome us, be able to make appropriate decisions. Because going through grad school and going through your internships and different pieces, by the time that you step out and you are like on your own, you've been equipped with the skills that you need. And like you at this point just have to put faith in yourself, just like you put faith in your students when they're going through difficult times and you know that they can overcome those. You want to remind yourself too, like you can do that as well, even if it's putting you into positions that you didn't necessarily see yourself in originally or anticipate being as part of your role. And especially when it comes to like imposter syndrome, I really enjoy, I don't enjoy imposter syndrome. I think that we all have that moment of time. I remember in grad school where we actually spent an entire class period talking about imposter syndrome
Wow.
and like how to work through it. And I don't know that we actually came up with any solutions on how to work through it, but I do remember talking about how it can, when it sets in, it can get real about it but really we have to be that willingness to just step aside how we're feeling and focus more on what we see and what we know to be true, and then put those anxious fears and thoughts to the side or tell them they're wrong. Cognitive behavioral strategy.
Yeah, I heard someone say, well, I just did it, but I did it scared, right? Like we feel like we're supposed to feel like 100% confident with every decision before we actually make that. And as we know, especially working with students and so many different staff members, oh my goodness, if we felt 100% confident in every decision, but I am confident this is a good decision based on the information I have at this time. And I'm confident that anyone else sitting around the table with me, if you really disagree, please bring this up, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's key too, is like encouraging people to share their thoughts and finding that common ground with things, because that also I think can build confidence by listening to people who have different views and being willing to take in their input, as long as they're willing to listen to you. Like that, there has to be a reciprocal relationship with that.
Well, in a field, especially as broad as this one is, I remember someone earlier on in their career had asked me, how many years until I feel like I'm going to know everything about our field? And I said, well, I'm in the middle of 20 something years. I don't feel that way. I can't imagine ever being like, and now I've learned it all. Like, there's just too much to know.
It's so funny you say that, because I was literally telling my spouse last week that every year I keep thinking, well, because sometimes people will be like, well, you've seen it all. And I'm like, I don't know, like I've definitely not seen it all. I've heard a lot. I've seen a lot, but I haven't seen it all. And I just more and more, I see people who 20 years in, 30 years in, will still say that, like, I still haven't seen it all, or, I've been doing this for so long and this is the first time. And so that to me is an inspiration to not be afraid to take the next step and the next leap, whether it be in leadership, whether it be in a different position, whether it be a career change. Like, at no point are you going to feel so completely confident in what you're doing.
Mhm.
And we shouldn't let that be the component that stops us from trying new things.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Well, many people in our field do want to become more involved in something like their state association, but it is that time commitment. You've talked a little bit about the importance of organization and time management. So how do you manage your time and make it work? You're on call for this brand new position. You're president of your state association. Like, how do you do it all?
Well, delegation, I think, is one component. And that's definitely something I've practiced a lot as president. Instead of, just going, oh, I'll just do this and do and that and so forth. It's more of a, okay, this is what needs to be done. Who's willing to take these parts, and really breaking it down, because I know, based on my time management and organization skills, on how to break down a problem and splitting it up appropriately, and then finding and, delegating to those based on their skill or what they're able to take on. And with all of that, and then of course, relying on the boundaries and the time management and other components. But I really think too, like, not feeling or even recognizing that even if you feel like you have to take all of it on, recognize that you can't take all of it on, and you shouldn't. Like, it's an organization. So it's going to take a team of people to do those things. And ultimately, the best thing that we can do is appropriately delegate and allow other people to really get stronger and more confident in what they're doing.
I love that.
Grow each other.
Well, is there anything else that you'd like to share or promote about your state association?
I mean, we have our conference. Our conference was supposed to be yesterday and Thursday, and just got moved to October. So I'm really excited, and I hope that we, get a lot of participants and it, yeah.
Awesome. We'll make sure to put the link to anything important about signing up for that conference into the show notes. So if anyone is interested in kind of learning what that professional development part will look like, that they are able to get on that.
Yeah.
Well, this podcast is called The Prepared School Psychologist. When you think of the word prepared, what do you do to help yourself feel more prepared in your role?
I do a lot of research, and I practice sometimes too. But I think one of the things that I do the most is I focus on what I can control, and I'm flexible for the things that I can't control. And I recognize that in any step, in any component of this job, president as ASPA, or, my paid for job, any capacity, even as a parent, at any point, there's going to be a component that I just can't control. And so just being willing to be flexible and ride the wave, really, it's just so helpful.
Love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for sharing all of your information with all of our listeners.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Of course. All right. Well, until next time, everyone.
That concludes another episode of the Prepared School Psych podcast. And I hope today's discussion equipped you not just with knowledge, but also the confidence to take action. Remember, every conversation we have and every resource we share builds a bridge towards a more inclusive and empowering learning landscape for our students. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more insightful conversations and resources to support your journey. Share this podcast with colleagues. We would love it if you would also rate and review the podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Just a reminder, everyone, the information and advice provided in this podcast are for guidance purposes only, and all listeners are required to follow both federal and state law and their own school district guidelines and policies. Thank you.